Preparing to stream.
We've got a message, it's now live on YouTube.
Good.
Yes, good to go.
Let's go, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the meeting of Froome Town Council. I am Andy Rintmore, your mayor. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Want to make our council and committee meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of where they are, virtually or in person. We're still getting used to having meetings with people both in person and those zooming in. So please bear with us if it feels a bit crunchy at times. For those in the room, a little housekeeping. Toilets can be accessed at the end of the corridor on the right-hand side, or there's an accessible toilet to the right of the lift. The emergency exit is on the right and the assembly point is in the car park. Participants on Zoom, councillors, staff, and those who are presenting, please make sure that you're muted, and unless you're invited to speak, of course. If participants want to comment or ask a question, please use the electronic raise hand by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. For those in the room, please just raise your hand. Attendees, we have 4 attendees registered on Zoom today and 2 in the room. Please can I ask that attendees on Zoom pose questions through the Q&A board. You are not on video but can be seen in name by councillors and staff. Attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record if their question is answered. For those attendees in the room, please raise your hand. Staff, Paul will clerk, Laura will take the minutes and manage the slides. Rachel and Sarah will manage the questions board and participant settings. And we are live on YouTube. And Becky will be doing some live tweets. That's it. That's it for that bit. So the first item on the agenda is any apologies for absence, declaration of interest from councillors, and we are going to attempt to approve the minutes from the meeting on the 14th of July.
So shall I give the apologies?
Yes, please.
Anita Collier, Ali Barclay, Nick Dove, Scott Ward and Sarah Butler.
And do we have any questions about the minutes from the last meeting? No? Okay.
Is someone to propose then?
Proposer? Richard, seconder? Mark? All in favour? Am I talking loud enough?
Mark Dorrington, you're not voting.
Yeah.
Who's voting? Right.
I changed it, sorry.
It takes a while to look at both screens. So that's unanimous.
So I guess we're on agenda item 2, which is questions and comments from the public and councillors.
Anne's got her hand up on Ben John. Oh, no, Anne's taken her hand
No,
down.
Anne? No, nothing from Anne.
John has got his hand up.
John, been a while. You're up.
No.
Oh. Richard, save me.
I just pre-warned Emma, sorry, I've been asked about, seems we've got Emma here today, Emma Reynolds from the college. There's an issue about a tree that was put up, an old tree that was made into a kind of carving, and it's recently been chopped down. I haven't seen it, but that's what people tell me. I just wondered if you could tell us why that was, or if you knew anything about it.
Yeah, do you want me to answer now?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no,
about it.
absolutely. So what you're referring to is Last Tree Dreaming,
That's right.
which is a tree which has carvings, artistic carvings, and it's in the corner of the playing field, which is the main playing field by Bath Road. And the tree was put up some years ago. And a number of artists work with the tree, and it's also funded as well beyond the college. As part of our surveys around site, we have regular annual surveys, site surveys. So they're from the local authorities. So the surveys would come in, they would look at the trees, look at the structures on site, very much from a health and safety point of view. So what they're looking at is to advise us or to tell us what we need to do to make sure that the site is safe, you know, for 1,300 teenagers and the staff. So we've got our annual survey. Our annual survey came round last May. They came around and looked at the site, and they identified last trees dreaming as a health and safety risk to the students on site. And that was in May. The report came back later in the summer. And obviously we act on what the local authority tell us, because it's all tied up with insurance and it's tied up with health and safety. So part of the tree has been lopped, and the pieces of the tree are lying under the hedge by the tree with the art in display. I've had a really good conversation with Barry Cooper last week about how we now move the tree into the next part of its life. So that's about celebrating the artwork that is around the tree. I think also it's an opportunity to allow the students to access the sculpture, because actually it's now on ground level. And so what we have noticed is a lot of students have shown a great deal of interest at break and at lunchtime. They've been able to go much closer to it and actually look at the artwork there. So in terms of moving forward, that's what we're aiming to do. We hope to be able to do it over this academic year, so 2021, 2022, and use it as a celebration of the artistic heritage of the college as well. So it's the tree moving into a new part of its life.
So it's not completely gone. I haven't
No,
gone to see it. So
no,
people told me
it's
about
not
it, said it's all
completely
gone,
gone.
it's all
No,
been
it's
smashed
not.
to pieces.
No, it's not been smashed to pieces.
Okay.
It has been locked. So the ground, the bottom part of it has a really good structure around it, and it is there. That's an intact. It's the upper part of it,
Right.
which was the health and safety risk. Obviously, when it was placed there, I'm sure that the local authority and all the teams that are around it had considered its placement, but over the time that the tree's been there, it has decomposed. And that was what was identified by the tree survey people and health and safety. But I see this as a way of moving that sculpture into the next part of its life and working with people within the school. Obviously, the students are really keen on doing some work with it, but also bringing artists from beyond that to work with the students in the same way when it's first worked on.
Right. Thank you for that.
Okay,
Thank you.
no, you're welcome.
Thank you for that. Oh yeah, sorry, any more?
No, can't see any on the screen now.
Okay, so agenda item 3 is a presentation from Emma Reynolds. We've just heard from you, so we're going to throw it back to you right now.
Thank you. Right, so obviously I'm a head teacher and I'm an English teacher, and I can talk for a long time. I know I've only got 10 minutes, so just stop me after 10 minutes and that's absolutely fine. I've got a very thick skin, so do stop me. So I just wondered whether it would be helpful for me to just talk about how it's been at college over the last 18 months. But I do want to focus on the positive. I think that's really important. And then thinking a little bit about going forward, and then a quick update about how we're celebrating the college's centenary, if that's okay, and then open to questions. So I think one of the things when we closed and went into lockdown in March last year, quite immediately I started thinking about this being opportunities. It's a tragic pandemic with repercussions, but actually working with adolescents at that time, going through that process, it was really important to focus on the positive. And I think the first positive thing that we've all learned at the college is the sense of community. We had an enormous amount of support from Froome community during lockdown. So some examples are the Rotary Club funded hot meals for students who are on school site. It's really important to note that the school was still open. All schools were still open during lockdown. So Rotary Club funded hot food for us, which was really important for the students we had on site. Had very few students during that first lockdown. They missed their peers, they missed their teachers. So actually being able to eat together at lunchtime was really important to them. And also the students that we had on school site at that time were the most vulnerable. So having a hot meal served in the middle of the day served that. And that was very much about the Rotary Club supporting us with that. We've had extra funding and support for counselling services, which have been incredibly supportive to the students coming back. We've had support from the community in terms of offering a range of services for us in terms of site services, offering us laptops. We had a call out for uniform, and if anybody's out there and they've got any Froome College uniform, please do send it into college, because what we do is obviously wash it up, dry clean it, and we distribute it for free around the student community. So I do a question for anybody out there who's got some uniform for us. That's fantastic. We had a great deal of uniform donated and a great deal of equipment, and the community really were behind us. Our staff went out into the community. So students who weren't able to come to college during that time, we were delivering food on a weekly basis. We were delivering work and collecting work to be marked on a weekly basis. So it was all about continuity. So I think one of the silver linings there is about the strength of Froome community, really important. I think the second thing around the lockdowns and what we've gone through over the last 18 months is that for some students, when they were coming into school throughout lockdown, actually, it was quite a positive experience for them. A smaller number of students on site that were being really well supported by teachers helped those students who felt anxious about school. And indeed, paradoxically, their attendance got better. So we had students who had struggled with school prior to the lockdown. During lockdown, they were coming to school much more often. So that was really positive, and a percentage of those have continued with that. So again, that is a silver lining that's come out of this. I think the third thing is the fact that over these last 18 months, and certainly coming back to school this autumn, we've talked a lot more openly about our emotional and mental health. So prior to lockdown, we had services for our students. We had an inclusion area where students could drop in. We had counselling services and mentoring. But I think over this period of time, with such disruption to our adolescent population, we have really focused on the words we use when we talk about mental health and emotional support, how we talk very openly about it, both in terms of assemblies and classes. We thread it through the curriculum. So what we are doing is encouraging young people to say to us, actually, you know, I do feel anxious. Actually, I do need some help with this, and not worrying about it, and not worrying about it. And that's a marked difference to what I would say 24 months ago, where it would be quite difficult to get adolescents to talk to us about that. So I do think that's a real positive, and I would really like to think that in the college we continue with that. It's really, really important. I think something else that we've learned over this pandemic is the use of our site. I mean, I talked about the last tree dreaming a few minutes ago, and you all know college site really well. We've got a beautiful site, and we've got a beautiful site that has been superbly used over lockdown and still now in this term, because you'll know that schools are being advised to do a lot more outside. It's healthier to be outside. It's healthier to learn outside in terms of ventilation. So we've really used our school site in the way that we probably never have done ever at Froome College. So lessons in ecos, I call it Froome Henge, lessons in ecos, which are absolutely fantastic. The lawns outside Northcote are art classrooms outside. If you come up and visit, you will see some of the artwork that our year 11 students did at the end of their final year last year. And it's absolutely beautiful. So when you walk around now, you see actually the site being used in a different kind of way to before. So learning isn't just in the classrooms, it's around all the open green spaces. And I think that is a wonderful silver lining as well. We've really enjoyed the Big Green Week this week. I'm sure you've been involved in it, but we've used again the site for Big Green Week to do some work with the students about heightening their awareness of the trees that we've got on site, and we've got various workshops. So we've had workshops about recreating textiles, about I think tonight was creating your own lip balm. We've been foraging on school sites, so it's been magnificent. And again, the pandemic made us look at our site differently, and it's made us appreciate our site more. So I think you look at the last 18 months, and schools have gone through a lot. They really have gone through a lot. But then at the same time, can we still hear me? I'm presuming we can. But at the same time, I think we have learned. I think we've learned as a school community, and I think our families have learned as well about the relationship between college and school. So there are good things about the last 18 months. That said, we are careful. We want our community to stay healthy. We follow governmental advice. We follow public health advice. And that does mean that we ask for patience from our families at times, where sometimes we do have to cancel or change things at the last moment, because we are acting on the advice of public health officials. I'm not a public health official. I say this to my friends, I'm not a doctor. I can't advise. What I do is I take advice and I share it with you about those things. So we have learned a lot. We're all back in college now, and we look forward to what we're going to be doing over the next 18 to 24 months. So one of the key things for us is again about our site. It's about raising the level, the standard of our facilities, particularly around STEM subjects. So our science and technology and maths department, so that's STEM, particularly our science facilities, are quite well used. So I don't know if you went to Froome College, anybody here, but so you'd probably recognise the science classrooms, and they are unchanged, certainly from when you went to school, I think, probably the next generation as well above you went to school. So we do need to find some way to invest in our science equipment and our science classrooms. That's a really important thing to us. Our science teaching is great. Our results are fantastic, and I would really like the students to be able to learn in 21st century science facilities. So that's one thing that we are really keen on approaching the local authority for in terms of support and developing our accommodation. Really important. The second thing that we're really focusing on is ensuring that our students who have not made the progress that we would want them to make over the last 18 months. I don't like to use this word, but I'm going to catch up. So it's how we support them to be able to make the progress that they need to make moving forward towards exams, towards their GCSE and their A-levels. But it's more than that, because school is more than your exams. It's about making sure that they feel that they are reintegrated back into school and that they are happy there and that they are supported. So that's a second really key focus for us. And that is particularly, I would say, around our free school meal and our pupil premium children. Those are the children that we do need to make sure we do more for, we offer more opportunities for, and we ensure that they can make the progress that they need. So those are the two key features for us in terms of the students and the site. I think the third big thing for us is getting back to college as it was, in a sense, in terms of some of the wonderful musical events. I mean, the music event on Saturday in Froome went really, really well. I hope we can have more outdoor music events in Froome. I think that will be fantastic. The music, the arts, I would like to see that we can have a performance in spring as well. So all of that extra, that incredible extra that Froome Colleges offers the students, that's what we want to reinvigorate over the next 18 months. So I'm going to pause there. I don't know if I'm up to my 10 minutes.
You've got 2 minutes to spare.
Fantastic, right? I should carry on. That's absolutely magnificent. So that was college sort of during the pandemic. That's our aims for the next 18 months. But of course, this year is our most important year because we're 100, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'm the 7th principal in 100 years. So what a privilege that is. I think it's a massive privilege. We had great plans for a fantastic bash this Sunday. We were going to have a great garden party up on site. It's going to be great. We can't, I'm afraid. So we've had to postpone that, and we've got a new date in the diary, which is the 2nd of July. Okay, 2022, so put that in your diary. What we have had, what we are going to do on Sunday is we've got a service in St. John's, so that's 11:30 to 12:30. Places are limited, I must say that places are limited, and it's first come, first served. But that's a chance for current staff to speak, previous heads to speak. Barry Bates, I hope very much, is going to come and say hello to us. We won't be able to bring our students to perform live there. So we are going to record them and hopefully see them in St. John's. So that's a lovely opportunity. Prior to that, Froome Museum is open. So if you haven't visited the fantastic exhibition of 100 years of Froome College life in the museum, I would very much urge you to do that. We've got the old uniform, which is rather fancy, I think, the old Froome College uniform, reports from students, some newsletters of some of the previous trips. For example, Froome College many years ago went on a trip to the Sahara. So just that in itself is magnificent, I think. So lots and lots of lovely information there. So I would urge you to go to Froome Museum. And on Sunday morning, Barry is opening it as well from 10 to 11. So people who want to come to the church service, they can pop in there as well. The other thing that we're doing in college in order to celebrate the 100 years is in terms of funding. So we have diverted some of the funding to put into a common pot for the staff to decide on how they celebrate Froome College. So every member of staff had £100 to decide to invest in a centenary project, and then we all voted for the centenary projects that we wanted to go forward. So the key centenary projects that we're doing over the next year, first one is rewilding. So that's rewilding part of the site, which in areas of the site is going to be absolutely fantastic. The second area we are focusing on is again with the environment and recycling and ensuring water fountains are readily available around site. That's a really important area for us. The third one is about developing our outdoor spaces even further. So those are the three areas of investment that we're putting back into college to celebrate our 100 years. And that has been at the bequest of the staff. We're going to do the same with the students. So over the next 4 months, get them to vote on the areas of improvement that they would like to see, because they are very privileged. And I was talking to our year 9s who've just come in and in their first assembly, I was saying to them, you know, you're sitting here 100 years after the first student came through these doors of Froome College. And that is a real privilege. So we want the students to be involved in terms of celebrating the 100 years of college as well. So it's going to be a great year, and it's going to be an absolutely fantastic year. I'm very pleased we're 100 in 2021 rather than 2020. I'm extremely pleased that the historians found that out for us all. And it feels like a very blessed place to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was amazing. I'll echo you with the Frome Museum exhibition. I've seen it twice now,
Okay.
and it's very good. And
Yes.
I'd implore you all to go.
Yeah.
I bumped into Mr. Boland when I was in there. He'd probably ring a bell to the older heads. Not me, too young. But the legendary Mr. Boland was there at the time. That was great. Thank you. I have a certificate to give you.
No, do this now. That'd be
Do it
nice.
now?
Then we'll have some questions about it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So this is for you. This is for outstanding contribution to commemorate 100 years of Froome College's contributions to the community. I don't know how I do this on. How do we do this on Zoom? Stand up. I don't know. People at home will be missing out. Maybe we'll. There we go. Oh, here we go.
There we are.
Get me in the frame.
That's smart. I'm going to put that in the section.
Oh, do it.
Thank you so much.
So I think now would be a great time to open up the floor to anyone who has any comments or questions or want to send their well wishes, etc.
Send some well wishes. I'll be seeing you on Sunday at church. As somebody who started from grammar school, as it was then in 1970, and I've just found a photograph of me, it's a 12-year-old.
Shocking, it's shocking.
I don't have as many affectionate memories of the horrible brown uniform as you have, but
I look rather smart to myself, but there we are.
it didn't last very long, but looking very smart, I'm sure. But thanks for all you've done. I'm looking forward to seeing what's been done in the past. When I was married, I came to see you a couple of times, and it was very impressive what you've done with the school. So thank you for that, and keep on keeping on. I'll see you on Sunday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Anything from anyone else?
Quickly, as somebody who recently retired from teaching a few years ago, you have a great reputation. I mean, I know that from local schools, you know, Reynolds, she's really good. So you've built this college up, I think, to a really good standard. It's never been a bad school, but I mean, it's in a much better position, I think, than it was a few years ago. So that's down to you. And I kind of, it's your positivity that I like, because I've got nephews and nieces, and I say to them, right, you're not the lost generation, you're the unique generation,
Yes.
because nobody else has got your experience. You have gone through something that nobody else has gone through before, never will, and you will learn far more from that. So, you know, staying positive is absolutely really important.
And I absolutely agree. And what is really interesting post-pandemic coming back is how students are challenging the status quo. And I think that's because they have seen the status quo be challenged through the pandemic. You know, school, we're not going to school anymore, we're not doing exams anymore. Things have changed dramatically. And actually what is really good is it seems to have energized this, this generation to say, actually, is that right? Should we really be doing this? I mean, the conversations we've had about uniform at college have been really interesting, and we've agreed that actually over the course of this academic year we're going to review our uniform, and that's about saying, actually, is this right? Do we really need to be wearing this? I say that publicly. Do we really need to be wearing this? But also conversations students have had with me about you know, where the uniform is sourced. Where's the material coming from? Is it environmentally friendly? How much does it cost? And why? Where are we buying it? And why do we have to spend so much money? So, and I think that is, and I've never heard that before. I mean, I've been teaching for 25 years, but I've not heard that kind of positive challenge two areas of school life,
Yeah.
which I actually think are really good conversations.
Yeah.
And I do think that is post-pandemic.
It's a big leveler as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's this
Yeah.
one-to-one, like internet lessons and things like that. It's been a big, because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And realization that actually we're all affected.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that kind of sense, certainly when people came back to college last September and this September, is, you know, the value of college. The value of college, it is about, yes, your lessons and it is about your exams, but it's not only that, it's about having someone to talk to. Teenagers are not famous for confiding in their parents, are they really? Nobody was really. And so actually having somebody which is detached, working in a school, can listen to you, that's really important. Seeing your friends at break and lunch, it is really, really important. And I think, again, post-pandemic, you see students engage in a different way in school. And I do think that's a product of it.
Sheila.
Thank you. It's interesting you bring up the idea of uniform. I must admit, well, partly because when I was at school, I campaigned to not have a uniform. It's been quite interesting. So, you know, everybody's saying that people going back to work are being much more relaxed about their clothes, and I was thinking the only place we're not being very relaxed is in schools, and I just find that astonishing. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say was, because I'm one of the trustees at the museum, well, one of the trustees at the museum, having a connection with the museum, I think, is really interesting one to prolong. And so I've been doing some of the conservation work on the Singer negatives, and I've contacted Emma Nibbs about working with some of the photographs to actually integrate it into the photographic work that she's doing up there, which is just brilliant. And that whole idea of doing more things online and connecting up that way, rather than having to come to the museum, we can actually send stuff to you, which is going to be interesting.
And that is great, that kind of virtual education. And I agree, the kind of efficiency of virtual life sometimes cuts out, doesn't it, some of the issues you have about bringing students to the museum or whatever. So the more we can share information.
And also for students to know that that resource is there.
Yeah.
You know, we've got that stuff and you can access it online. So that's great.
That's great.
Thank you.
So Andy Palmer has his hand up virtually. I'll make a note of Stevie on the list.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Hi, Emma. Great to see you virtually. Just wanted to say again, echo some of the things that others have said. Thank you very much for what you and your team of teachers and support staff have done throughout the pandemic. And again, thank you to you for the time that you spent with Paul and I when we came to see you earlier in the year. You're absolutely right. You've got a fantastic site and campus at the college. And I think what you've done with the outside spaces was brilliant. And it's good to hear that you're going to continue that with a number of them. So yeah, again, well done for everything you've done. And thank you on behalf of all of us, really.
Thanks for your support. Thank you.
Andy Jones.
Yeah, thanks. Really good to hear all the positives. I'm just wondering if, as you look at the coming academic year, there are areas where you would be asking the community for any specific help. If you're looking for people to do more work placements or anything like that, then there's a good opportunity here to get that word out.
Yeah, I think certainly work placements. So in terms of work experience was postponed last year. We weren't able to do it. We did quite a lot of virtual work experience, but actually the physical going to work, I think that's absolutely necessary for students. So work placements for work experience for year 10 and year 12, that would be fantastic. If anybody felt they could put themselves forward for that, then please do contact college, that would be one thing. I think in terms of vocational training as well. So what I would be really keen to do is to help build up the number of apprenticeships in Froome. So for students either leaving in year 11 or year 13 and working together, and their work has started in Froome about this, but encouraging more students into apprenticeships, that would be really, really keen. I think in terms of practical support for college, I think I mentioned uniform. I know we talked about uniform earlier, but you know, any donations of anything like that will help tremendously, because we can just pass them on to our young people and our families. In the same way, any kind of equipment, any kind of textbooks, anything you have at home that you're not using, please do send it to us and see if we can use it. We had Josh Hampson, who runs the music department. He put out on Facebook a plea for musical instruments. That was a couple of years ago, and he got a magnificent response. So if there is anybody else out there who's got some fabulous musical instruments who doesn't want to use them anymore, then give them to us, because we can certainly find musicians to use them. That would be absolutely great. So any of those areas are absolutely lovely. I think the other thing as well, in terms of looking forward to the garden party on July the 2nd, if there is any members of the town council who would like to work with us in preparing for that, that would be absolutely great too. And it doesn't mean just making tea. It's quite a lot in it. So yeah, thank you.
Steve. Thanks, Annie. As a parent of someone at the school, I just want to commend and thank you for the work you guys did last year. It was the flexibility that you showed in all the various lockdowns and coming out of lockdowns as a parent was great, because we sort of knew what was going on at any one time, which was the only really area that we did know what was going on, quite frankly, last year. And it was I think it was very tough for the students working from home, but a lot of the teachers made it a much nicer experience than some other schools that I've heard of, in terms of interaction, in terms of actually physically doing the lessons, rather than just putting something on the computer and letting the kids get on with it. So thank you. I think it made a real difference.
And we want to continue with that. So in terms of virtual teaching, I mean, it does offer opportunities. So for example, if a student is poorly for a period of time, we want to get to the point where either we have recorded the lessons or they can engage in the lessons whilst they're being taught. It's a bit clunky engaging at the moment, so we've still got work to do there. But that is something we want to move forward with. Something we really are going to hold on to is virtual parents' evenings. We had such a positive response about virtual parents' evening. Again, you know, every time we do it, we improve. It's not going to be perfect every single time for every single parent, but overall, parents were saying to us, this is great. It takes the stress away. You know, I mean, I'm a parent. When you arrive late and you missed your place in the queue and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, parents were essentially, this is lovely because I've got a chance to talk to my child prior to meeting the teacher. It's at home, it's calm, I can prepare. And the teachers were saying exactly the same. So the teacher was saying, I could totally focus on this child and this parent without other people being around me. I wanted to say, so it worked really, really well. So we're going to carry on with that. We're going to have a hybrid model. So parents who want to engage virtually, that's great. But then we still have parents who want to come up and they want to meet us. And so we're going to try and offer both for parents' evening. So we're going to hold on to some of that virtual stuff because it has been incredibly beneficial for certain things around school. And I think also, for teachers connecting with other teachers in other schools, which, you know, if you've got teachers that have to travel to another school, that takes time. But if you've got them connecting and working together, that's been really beneficial. So some of the work we've done with schools, particularly in Wiltshire, has been really successful as well. So there's things for us to take.
The virtual parents' evenings were excellent.
Yeah,
they really were. Yeah, because you didn't have to worry about timings and stuff like that. You have to worry
about finding a car parking space.
Yeah.
Which actually I could make. I don't know if you have 2 seconds on the car park. So yes, the car park. So the car park between college and the leisure centre. We've tried in many different ways to get help to re-tarmac that car park and reline that car park, as in the white lines. I don't know if you visited there, but it isn't satisfactory. And in my eyes, it's actually, you know, quite tricky. It's quite, I hate to use this word, but it is quite dangerous because one can't see the lines. There are too many potholes in that car park. So anyway, the town council can help me to find a way to tarmac it and white line it properly, considering this is a car park that serves also a nursery. I would just point out a nursery and the theatre and the school and the leisure centre. Help with that would be much appreciated.
Really handy not having white lines when you're 8 pounds.
See what I mean? Yes, yeah, but that car park.
Paul, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks again for that. It was really useful to get that update. One of the things we as a council are very aware of at the moment is that there's more houses being built. The rate of houses being built is likely to increase. There's one college. What are your thoughts about expansion, room for expansion, or would you think that the county as the education authority needs to be looking for other sites, or what happens in 10 years' time when you're full? Basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly from all the projections and predicted numbers, that time will come. I think it's a conversation to be had around the use of the site, because the site is big. And so therefore there is the possibility to build on site. I mean, I talked about the science block, potential new science block. There is room to build on that site. I think there's also a conversation to be had about where these new housing areas are being built, and also the impact of moving so many people from one side of Froome to the other. And therefore a satellite school might actually be the best way forward. I've seen some very good systems where it might be that the sixth form area moves to a satellite school, for example, and then the main site has got the Key Stage 4, because I think there is an impact on the wider kind of Froome community if you are moving so many people from one area to another through actually quite a narrow area as well. So I think the transport and travel is something very important for us to consider. Do I think schools of 2,000 students in one area are a good thing? No, I don't. I think there is a certain point where one reaches a limit, and therefore there has to be a satellite, or there has to be a secondary school attached to the first school. And as I say, I've seen some very, very good models of that. I've seen some very good models about sixth form working with that. And that would allow also the community to have perhaps sixth form provision, which includes more vocational provision as well. So that might be a way that we want to pursue it. So by that, I talk about, for example, mechanics, and setting up a vocational mechanics course within a sixth form, which at the moment we wouldn't be able to do. But if we were looking at actually moving the sixth form onto a different site, that might be something that we can do. But I think certainly, given the popularity of Froome, I fully expect the numbers to continue to grow, which is a great place to be. I mean, it's the perfect place to be for the Froome community and for the college. But it does pose an issue, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years, and how we manage that. So yes, and I also think it's about working with other schools within the community as well. So the relationships with the middle schools and whether there can be movement around there as well. Because there are sites in Froome where a new school or a new satellite school could be set up. And it's just about how we all work together to get there. And I think it does have to be a common agreement across all schools. Yeah.
And are you having any of those conversations with the county council at the moment, with sort of future planning for that event? Because as you say, it's going to happen. Yeah.
So I have raised this with the county council about where we're going next. So for example, our current year 9 are, well, almost full in that year group. And as the years go on, then we will have that pattern similarly in all of the year groups. So I have raised that about how we're going to plan forward with that. And there are some good ideas on the table. So it's about how we pull that together. I think also considering, Froome as a community and what Froome community want, because parents need choice. I've always said that parents should be able to choose. And so it might be an opportunity for the wider community to think about what types of schools their children are going to as well. So it's a wider conversation. Yeah. But it is a really good place to be. Really good place to be.
You know that.
Any more comments or questions? No? Well, thank you, Emma. That was
Thank you very much.
very informative, and congratulations again on your centenary. We're going to move on to agenda item 5 now.
It was just
I'm sorry, I'm just passing around.
Oh, okay.
passing around the homework.
Teach us have a handout.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5 is an update on the Unitary Somerset and to approve working with other Mendip towns over devolutions. Devolutions of some assets and liabilities. and that is with Maxine, the lovely Maxine, and Paul Wynn.
Hi, Andy. Hi, everyone. Mostly this is actually going to be the lovely Paul. So I'm just introducing it. So you guys might have noticed that like unitary is happening. And we in Froome obviously want the very best out of new unitary offerings for Froome, for our residents, for our surrounding parish councils, etc. So, you know, work has started, and it's many facing. You know, we're facing our community, we're facing other town councils, we're facing the new unitary authority, we're facing our parish councils around us, and it's quite intricate. So initially, we're just looking at two things, which Paul's going to cover. First of all, the item on the table, which is around whether we have our election next year, which means that we will do 3 years in this term, and it'll be 5 years next term, and I believe 3 years the term after, for anyone who cares what happens in about 10 years' time. But that's potentially how it's going to go. And the other thing we need to look at is how we look at devolvement of assets or services to us while we're in the last year of Mendip still being around, until they merge, Mendip and county merge as the unitary authority. So having said that, over to Paul.
Thanks, Maxine. Yeah, just to hopefully you've got the note I wrote in front of you. Just kind of for the minutes, really, that the Secretary of State has now confirmed that there'll be a new unitary council that will be the current Somerset County boundary. There'll be unitary council elections in May next year, so May 22. That term of unitary council will be for 5 years, then it'll go to 3, and then it'll go back to 4, and we're back on the normal cycle again. From May 22 to May 23, which will be vesting day, there'll be a shadow authority. There are no rules on how that happens, and there's uncertainty about whether the county council will lead that or whether it would be a 5-way party between the 4 district councils and the county council. So those are some unknown, or that is an unknown at the moment. Talking about elections, as Maxine said, we are, as a parish council in Somerset, is being asked whether we have a preference to bring forward the election to from May 23 to May 22 next year, to be in line with the unitary council elections, and then we would follow that cycle thereafter that I just described at the unitary council will. I don't know whether we have a choice. I think it will be unlikely, but what we've heard is that the minister has confirmed that the majority view of parish councils in Somerset will determine whether the election is brought forward by a year. So I suggest that the council gives me a steer to be able to go back to the Somerset Association of Local Councils, who are consulting on behalf of the government with a what's your preference. As I said in the note, at the time of writing, I haven't had any further updates, but at the time of writing, there was 35 responses from parishes. 33 of them were in favour of bringing the election forward. There would be financial implications if we went alone, if we were able to go alone, I hasten to add. And that would simply be the cost of the election, because at the moment we share it with the district council. If we went for elections in May next year, we would share it with the unitary council. If we didn't, then we'd have to bear the burden of that cost, which I estimate would be in the region of 30,000 as opposed to 14 or 15,000. Basically, we split the cost 50-50. There are some cons as well about it, obviously, not least the one that this council would have a 3-year cycle as opposed to 4-year cycle in which it was planning to get things done. So it's not a black and white thing, but it would be, I'd really appreciate it if you could sort of decide one way or the other this evening, so then I can respond in that way back to Salk. So that was the first recommendation. Andy, shall I carry on and just finish what I'm going to say and then open the discussion up? Would that be okay?
Yeah,
okay. As Maxine happened, there's devolution likely to happen in some form or another, and what that means is that either the district, before PERDA kicks in, which I presume will be in April next year, there's an opportunity that may be available to us by working with the other towns in Mendip to sort of devolve some of the assets and liabilities of the district council before the unitary is formed. That's not being underhand, that's just, if everyone's in agreement, why wouldn't it want to happen sooner rather than later? We've had some very early discussions with the other Mendip towns who are interested, like us, in exploring that. There's nothing for me to ask you about whether you'd like something devolved, but just I'd like a kind of an okay from you for Maxine and myself to carry on those discussions. And then the third element of this is about local community networks, which is exciting to some people, a disaster to others. This council has advocated the establishment of local community networks over the last 18 months, and we've been 100% successful in the unitary project now includes what we asked for 18 months ago, and we've been working closely with them on what that might mean. A local community network is a group of parishes working together with the unitary councils to get things done. And we've had some early discussions, and a lot of you will know, with our neighbouring parishes, and those will continue into October, and then we'll see where we get to. So those are the three sections that I just wanted to raise with you, and happy to take any questions. Laura, would you maybe put the two recommendations up on the screen? And I think Anne has had a hand up, and then John.
Hi, Paul. It's a question for you, really. The vested interest in all of the other parish councils, presumably where the majority of them co-opt rather than elect their councillors. So it's pretty much immaterial to them whether they have elections next year or the year after. So I just wonder how many of the ones that have expressed a preference so far are like us, in that we normally hold elections, or whether they just don't really care.
I don't know the answer at the moment. I can certainly ask Salk that question, and I'll circulate it amongst councillors. But you're right. I mean, if the same councillors sit on the council year after year or 4 years after 4 years, then it wouldn't make any difference. But except if there was an election, if one of the seats was contested, one of the wards in the parish or the parish council had six candidates on 5 seats, then that cost of that election would come into that equation, obviously. But you're right about co-opting. What's the difference? 3 in a 5-year cycle as opposed to 2 4s?
I suppose a follow-on question from that, is it one parish council gets one vote? I mean, we're a big parish council, but do we, count the same as a tiny little parish council somewhere in deepest, darkest Somerset?
The conversations that we've had so far with the unitary project team are that they hope that decisions will be made by consensus. That is their aim. We are starting to talk about how those local community networks might operate, and at the moment the detail on that hasn't been agreed. But I would say that the unitary project team is very positive about working with all the parish councils. But your point made that there's say, for example, there may be 17 parishes in the Froome area. How would that work? The question before that really, Anne, is would the parishes get any vote at all? Or whether it's just simply down to a unitary council vote, sorry, unitary councillor vote. And those questions are being asked, but none of it has been decided. It's still too early days.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. John?
Thanks very much. So I sort of, I have a question along the lines of what was just posed. There's this question of majority. What is that majority? The majority of 10%, the majority of 90%. So that's my question. It's relevant also to the type of councils there are. But as far as I can tell, the only argument for changing our cycle is financial. I can't see any other argument to do it other than that. And I'm not sure that's justification for, I can't see the justification. If it's just financial, well, our council has spent lots of money over the past 10 years and all kinds of crazy stuff. 15,000 is not that much in relation to all that. So I think we should bear that in mind. But what is the motivation for changing the cycle? And I think that it goes to the heart of our relationship with the unitary, that, you know, we're not dependent on the unitary is dependent on us. And I think we should think about that as a council in terms of our power base and what power we actually have. So if we suddenly conform to exactly what the unitary cycle is because it's coming, it sort of hands away our power. I sort of feel both possibly physically, possibly institutionally, but I think psychologically as well. So I think you need to think about it carefully. I can't see the justification. 15,000, okay, whatever. And then my final comment is sort of around the assets between now and then that we can take on some amended assets. I think that's great, of course, but I think we have to be careful of the poison chalice. You know, we have to be really careful and really analyze what we're actually taking on, because some of those things come with major costs and we have no certainty what we're going to actually get to manage those costs. So I think any assets we take on, it's unclear that we take on these assets and suddenly we're left with the cost and unitary says, oh, sorry, you have to take those on yourself. So that's quite a big risk I think we need to think about. And when we're talking to the unitary, assets are one thing, powers are the other thing. Powers are the much more important thing that we need to be negotiating for. So part of us being willing to taking on assets, part of that package is that we also need to have certain powers. And I think we should be clearly positioned in that way in a negotiating stance with the council. So just 15,000 because of the election, we're going to change our cycle so we look like the new unitary, and then we have to change it again. It's going to be confusing for, I think, residents. Why is this happening? Why are we doing that? It's making us look weak with the unitary system. We're conforming to them rather than them conforming to us, and so forth. So I just want to share that. That's all.
Thanks, John.
And thank you very much for the work you've been doing on it as well.
Do you come back on a couple of those?
Yeah, and then we'll go to Maxine because I think she wants to come back.
I think your questions, John, about sort of doing the due diligence on assets and liabilities and services, powers are, I agree completely, and we will. I will ensure that you're fully informed before any decisions are made on that. We have to, I think, hope that the district council is willing to discuss with us on some of the things that we might be interested in taking. And at the moment, we haven't got that from them. And that's why Maxine and I are looking to work with the 5 mended towns to sort of see if there's any consensus we can build around those bodies. There's one other thing that I didn't mention. I apologise, I should have done. One of the other things that might be sensible to consider if the election is going to be next year, and that is about all the new councillors starting together and being in sync with the unitary cycle. I mean, that admittedly, that could be a really bad thing, but intuitively, it seems to me that it's probably quite a good thing. And the very first question, John, you asked about what is a majority. I I expect the answer to that to be the majority view of the people, or the parishes that responded to Salk's question. That's it. And I think what will happen is that the minister will take that majority and put that into the secondary legislation that is being drafted to establish a unitary council. I say I think because I'm not absolutely sure, and it's a bit unknown at the moment.
Just a tiny question. So of the five Mendip towns, what are their responses of the four others?
I don't know, and I haven't asked them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maxine, your hand's gone. Did you not have anything?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, actually, John, I'm really fascinated. We need to find out, don't we, what our surrounding towns are thinking about the election. I think that's something we can do very quickly, actually. But what I was going to say is we've, with the devolution thing that you were asking about, John, and, you know, how we know and what we want, et cetera, this is something that we've struggled with, I know, for the last year, really. You know, trying to work out what it really means in practice, what it means to us as a council, what an asset or a liability actually means, and what a service, taking on services, actually means. So, you know, we've got these, the consultants that we've taken on, and that's something that they can really go into for us and bring back to us as a group and as a council. So because they're, you know, that's what they're there for, to do things like that for us that we're finding quite tricky to put the meat on the bones, I think. So nothing's going to happen without you all knowing. And, you know, this is all going to be looked into, and we're not just going to be saying, yeah, we'll have that, and then find ourselves with something we thought was an asset that actually turns out to be costing an awful lot to run it each year. So we are going to do the due diligence, as Paul already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Richard?
Thank you. I'm sort of in favour. I've listened to what John and Anne have said. I'm very much in favour of what they've been questioning. I think it's important that we find some, you know, what have we, 25% of the population we represent in Mendip. It feels like we ought to have a bigger vote, some sort of proportional representation in that. I am personally against going for an early election. That's not because I don't intend to stand again, but I'd like to see my 4 years out. I'd like to see this council finish its work, and I think that's a natural thing to want to do. Also, I can't see the point of doing a 5-year and then a 3-year. You might as well just allow us to finish our 4-year, then the next administration could do 4 years, and that would bring it into line with the unitary, which would be a 5-year, presumably. And then you can either go for all 4 years or all 5 years in future. That to me would make far more sense and would be much less disruptive. But we'll see what happens. I've got a specific question though, one that I didn't realise I hadn't, you know, got in my head properly until last night. The shadow unitary, when that comes into place next May, what happens to Mendip Council? Does that go? Do Mendip councillors no longer have a job, or do they carry on for a year until the shadow unitary is kind of put in place?
Mendip Council and Mendip councillors will be two different things, I think. So what will happen is, we think, and you know, it's not through kind of, oh, I don't know, I never thought of that. I mean, we just don't know the answers to these things for sure. But I expect the elections in May 22 to replace the councillors at district and county with a group of unitary councillors. And they will work with the staff in those 5 councils to move forward to create 12 months later the unitary council. And that's called vesting day. So that's why I differentiate between councillors and councils, because the work has to be seamless. You know, if the licensing department stops for a year while the unitary is getting itself together, that won't work, will it? So the work of the councils, 5 of them, will continue, until vesting day, and then it will be rebranded and jigged about and fundamental change happens. I don't know.
Okay, so that clarifies that for me. That's good. Thank you. So essentially, the new unitary councils are going to have a very busy year.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's another reason for me to say, well, at least if the parishes know what they're doing and the councillors who are in a town council like Froome know what we're doing, they won't have to worry too much about us, you know, if you know what I mean. They get some support from us and some problem.
Yeah.
It's just my thoughts on that, but thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, Richard. Andy, you were next.
Thanks. I may be overthinking this one, but I can see John's point about, you know, we don't want to jump into the unitary hoop, if you like, but equally, next May's election is going to have a huge marketing exercise behind it. It's going to be promoted as something that really is going to try and drive up the turnout across the whole of Somerset to give this new council its mandate. And I think there's a risk that if we don't align Froome Town Council to that cycle, then the following May's turnout is going to be a relatively disappointing number and may not give us the mandate that we feel we need to fight our corner in the bigger Somerset picture.
Thanks, Andy. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Andy. I sort of want to elaborate on what Rich said actually about, I mean, one of the fears I've got is that in May of next year, if we have this vote and the new council's voted in, I mean, I just remember when the first few meetings I went to as a councillor, I didn't have a clue what was going on, quite frankly. And my fear is that a new council with a batch of new councillors just could get rolled over by, you know, some pretty hard-nosed councillors out in Somerset, in you know, Somerset County Council and whatever, and we end up with absolutely nothing. You know, by the time we realise that, it's too late. That's why if you know, if this council stays together for another year, we'll see that coming and we can fight that off. Interesting. But I do think we're in a rock and a hard place as well.
Thanks, Steve.
That thing when you're third in the queue and the two people who go before you say the things that you similar things to what you were going to say. So I apologise that I'm going to repeat some stuff, but I've got, you know, just some random comments and thoughts. I too, one of the things that I thought and reflecting on was when we see elections combined at multiple levels, we see greater turnout. People participate at lots of different tiers, you know, people vote in, if it's town and district and county and general, people come out for that. The more fragmented elections are, the lower the turnout. And I think one thing we absolutely want is to be sure that people of Froome are actively engaged in discussions and debates and voting, because it's the weapon that we have. I think on going to John's point on 15,000 is sort of, you know, neither here nor there in the budget. Yeah, 15,000 is neither here nor there in the budget. But 15,000 is a lot of money in the budget of the food bank or other causes and people in the community. And I'm not sure that I want to be the person putting my hand up to say, yeah, we're spending that 15,000 having our own special election rather than just lining up the elections and not making that money do something more for the community. But you know, that's just a me thing. On the 3-year thing, yeah, I think it's frustrating that we might only do 3 years rather than 4. I don't think, though, any of us knew that the 3 years we were going to do would be the 3 years that we have done. You know, none of us set out and wrote the strategy thinking, well, hey, let's put in the pandemic chapter. You know, let's put in the world is on fire chapter. It's not what we expected. And actually, maybe, you know, taking this as a sort of moment to go reflect, learn, think. I'm adapting from Emma here because she said it so brilliantly about taking the things that were positive and taking them forward and allowing and encouraging kind of the next council and set of councillors to really run with it for 5 years and to be aligned in timetable with the unitary. I think I'd written down the positive version of what Steve said about new councillors coming in, and he thought they'd be run roughshod a little bit by, mean Somerset people. My thing was more, actually, isn't this a real chance for them to be developing together the ways of working of the new unitary world? But I'm just being a nice, optimistic person this evening. So I was kind of probably just leaning on the side of, okay, let's just line up and then make sure that whoever is representing Froome at town level is as bolshy and confident and independent and feisty as town councillors have been for many years now. And I'm sure they will be. That's it.
Lizzie, we're going to go to Andy Palmer next.
Thanks, Andy. So the problem with being fourth in the queue is that other person who's taken all the. No, my feelings on this are very, very simple. I think it's going to happen. Talking as a councillor rather than a member of our particular political persuasion, I just don't see any good publicity coming out of this from to the people of Froome, from us spending money that we don't need to spend when we're lining up for an election the following year, or indeed, I don't believe there's any good publicity to come out of this for us voting voting against this when it's likely to happen anyway. Lizzie's right. The money doesn't sit right with me. That 15k could go to something we could be doing positively rather than just setting up polling stations. I agree with Lizzie again. I think a fresh group of councillors could really take the unitary discussion forward. I don't necessarily think it necessarily, assuming things would go the way we would hope they would go, that it would be as high a churn in the councillor demographic that we had when this term started. So I'm confident that we would be able to carry it through, or the next administration would carry it through. And I think we've all personally got enough respect and trust in the officers we have within this council to actually make sure that we won't run roughshod by the county as well. We have to remember we're a full team of councillors and officers. So I don't see any benefit in voting against this decision personally. It is disappointing, and I take everybody's opinion on board and their personal feelings. I'm as disappointed as Rich, as Steve, as Mark, and the others that have spoken so eloquently, but I don't see any benefit in voting against them.
Thank you, Andy. John.
It's nice to hear people being so worried about how we spend our money. I hope that comes up as we look at other expenditure plans. I don't think it has been that big of a concern. I think elections are important and they're worth the money. I think the key thing, what I think strategically for us, is that we want to all be behind some really strong unitary candidates that we get into power, who can be a voice to Froome. And I worry if we conform to their cycle, although we conform to their cycle, but again, we're going to have a chops, as Richard explained completely. I worry about the fact that it's going to distract, and we won't get the kind of candidates we want at the unitary, because that's where the power is. Let's not forget that. We can as a parish council, we can change our names and everything, but at the end of the day, it's the power relationship we have with the new unitary. And that's what I think, if we could all get behind some really strong candidates and place them in there, I think that would be more effective rather than us disrupting. But of course, I will go with the majority.
Thank you, John. Mark?
Thanks, Andy. I'm minded to agree with Rich. I would like to see a gradual handover. I think the council that this council represents next year will be very, very different to the council we see today. I think there'll be a lot more responsibilities, a lot more obligations. We can no longer pass the buck to the district and say they're making the decision. It's not us. For example, in planning, we will have to make the decisions, and the new council will have to be appreciative of that. There's also the issue that if a town councillor also wishes to become a unitary councillor, the workload of that person is going to be huge, especially during this first year, the shadow year, when you're actually not just being a councillor, you're creating a council. And I think people who are thinking about doing that, or standing as councillors for either of the administrations, really have to give that a lot of thought, because the amount of time that's going to be involved in this, even on our council alone, is going to be significantly more than we use at the moment. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. I do take into account the standalone elections. I mean, the police commissioner election stood alone earlier this year. The turnout was less than 20%. I think we will get more than that in our council, but it does demonstrate that it's much easier for people to go and vote once for a whole ballot list of things to do, rather than just one position. So I'm minded with Rich to have a gentle handover the first year, still as the town council, and then carry on the 4 years after that. But I think the decision's been made, and so I think we're just raising a point for the sake of raising a point, but I think the point needs to be raised.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to go to Sheila, we're going to head to Paul, and then we're going to wrap this up.
I think the issue we're talking about is needing the next generation of Frome Town Council to be supported if there's quite a lot of new people, so that they can actually work well together. And I think there is potential for a sort of much more connection with people who have experience in the community. You know, there's us. I don't intend to stand again, having done previous 4 years, and these 3 years it will be. But I'm more than willing to support the new councillors who are coming on board. And it's sort of like a shadow council then. I mean, none of us get paid, and we can, you know, I can certainly afford to contribute some of the understanding that I have. I absolutely agree with Steve. When you first start as a councillor, it's pretty baffling. And so having people who are you're able to talk to and just find out about how things function and how things work is incredibly valuable. And maybe we as a council should actually look at that new way of actually operating, which will be about people in our community supporting the council more by giving their expertise from, in our case, being a councillor. But it could be other topics that we have that they need to know about.
Thanks, Sheila.
Why don't we have a shadow town council for a year as well?
Yeah,
and then you could have two lots of shadows.
That's what she was getting at.
It is.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Paul.
Yeah, I would really just to sort of sum up. I mean, the recommendation from me is to decide whether to. So I purposely didn't go. I by design sat on the fence on this. I didn't give you a recommendation to go either way, knowing full well that there is not a right answer to this. In an ideal world, the 4 year cycle would continue, and we're just at a place because the unitary council is coming on board now. If it was this time next year, then we wouldn't be having this discussion. There's, as I say, I think the discussion over the money side of the cost of it, I think is you would be doing 2 elections on your own and not splitting the cost. So that's 30,000 in 2 elections as opposed to 15. But take on board completely all the reasons that you've said that it might be a good thing.
Why would it be 2?
Because if this is big, if this council was allowed to choose, and as I say, I'm not sure that we will be able to, because the next parish council election would be in 23,
yeah,
and then the unitary election would last 5 years and then 3 years. So we would be out of sync for 2 elections, I think.
But spread over 8 years then.
Yes. So it'll be 5 and 3 as opposed to 4 and 4.
Yeah, but the second one you'd be in sync. the question would then come up again in 11 years' time to say.
That's yes, yeah.
That was kind of my point earlier.
No, maybe you're calculating that wrong. If that's the case, then step down on that one, Paul. No problem. So I think what we can do is take a vote on this. I will write to South accordingly, and I'll also try and get some more information from South about what way it's looking at the moment that I can share with you all. And as I say, I don't know whether we have a choice. I think it's probably unlikely, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that was all right. There was a good discussion. Thank you. It was really interesting for me.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone. We're going to go to item agenda 6, which is discussion. Sorry.
So, Laura, would you be able to bring up the recommendations again? And Andy, do you think it would be okay if I paraphrase the recommendation, just say one way, because deciding whether to respond either way, you can't really vote on. So, go for it. Could I put words into your mouth and say the proposal is to vote against bringing the election forward? Is that okay? I can do it the other way around if you like. The proposal is to vote in favour of bringing the election forward. What would you like to do?
So the proposal is to have the elections next year. Those for, those against.
It comes down to who's for and against having it early.
Yes, that's right. So who? I knew I was going to come across this because I knew it wouldn't be unanimous. Don't even think about it. So maybe the proposal is all those in favour of bringing the election forward to May 22. Laura, did you get that written down?
And had a hand. I'm going to have to kill my phone because it's going to die. So I'm going to come off the Zoom.
We can share.
We can share. Yeah.
So the proposal is that this council prefers to bring the election forward to May 22. So that's the wording that we'll use. So all those in favour.
All those in favour.
Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see. So I can see Maxine, Andy, Lizzie, and Anne voting in favour of bringing it forward at the moment. Okay. Those against.
Those against.
And that's 5 against. And can I just make sure, Sheila, did you hold?
No, I didn't, because I sort of want to be able to say there's a sort of middle ground, which is I'm happy for it to be either way, as long as the council is supported. So I'm sort of inclined to abstain.
Okay.
I don't mind whether it's one or the other, as long as this council is supported in doing the work that it's going to do.
That's fine. So we've got 4 in favour and...
John, are you voting or ask a question?
He's voting.
Okay.
He's voting.
All right.
Okay. No, I'm voting. I'm voting. Sorry, I'm voting.
There's so many confused faces.
Yeah, this is the beauty of a hybrid meeting, isn't
Yeah.
it? So what I have then, I have John, Rich, Andy, Paul, Mark, and Steve. So I think that's 6. 6 against. So the response this council will give.
Oh, sorry, no, I voted for.
Andy Rintmore, I said.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
6 councillors voted to keep the elections to May 23. Good. Got there. Good. Thanks, everyone. The second recommendation is the second recommendation is simply to continue the dialogue about possible devolution prior to the unitary elections with the Mendip District Council. Maxine and I were just sort of like a mandate really to make sure you're happy with us to have these discussions. So who's in favour of that one? Oh yes, sorry, getting above myself. Proposer.
I'll do that. Rich, second to Steve. Unanimous anyway.
Yeah, I think that's unanimous. Can I just make sure no one's voting against it? Just make yourself known if you are, just in case I've missed anyone. Good.
Record my abstention.
And I will record your abstention, Sheila. Yes, yes. And just for the record, Andy Rootmore proposed that the one about the bringing the election forward, and it was seconded by Paul Horton. Because I forgot.
Okay, right. Are we good for 6 now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Item agenda 6 is a discussion on external fundraising to support Froome Town Council's strategy and work programme. This one is with Kate.
It is indeed, of course it is.
Hello,
It's
Kate.
twilight slot. So there was a really good segue, John. Thank you. You introduced it really by saying we need to think carefully about and strategically about how we spend our money, what we're spending it on, what that looks like. And as we are starting to build up next year's work programme, or in the very early stages of it, but actually just in finishing this year's work programme, we're starting to identify that there are lots of things that are not likely to make the cut in terms of budgeting. But there are lots of opportunities regionally and nationally for leveraging in funding. And actually, in many ways, lots of those opportunities have come to fruition over the last 18 months. We've seen quite a lot of external funding coming in to Froome, and Froome Town Council has been quite successful with fundraising, but it's taken a lot of officer time. But also our strategic objectives seem to be aligning very nicely with what's coming over the hill in terms of sort of national objectives. And maybe we were slightly ahead of recognising that mental health was going to be an issue. So we've got lots of things in the pipeline that we want to fund for it. You know, mental health is one of those. And I have detailed lots more in the paper here. So lots of things in the pipeline that we know we want to work with partners on. We already have a budget for a fundraiser, and we haven't used that this year. So this is really ahead of us putting out an advert for a fundraiser. We wanted to pick your brains and to get just any pearls of wisdom, any thoughts, anything that you think we might need to include. So this is for discussion and a bit of a steer from you.
Okay. John has his hand up.
So just a clarification, this is for an additional staff member, and is this a temporary short-term position? Is this a permanent position? What is this?
So we're looking at this being a freelance position, and it might be more than one person. So there are lots of areas across our strategic objectives and our work programme that we can see opportunities. So for example, in tourism or in the resilience projects, certainly in community projects and in children and young people's work. And we're hopeful that more than one fundraiser might come forwards, because actually having fundraiser with experience and knowledge in particular areas is really useful when it comes to doing the prospect research, or saying, yeah, that funder is going to be a really good fit for this one or not, and could save us lots of time. So if you like, we're looking to put out an advert that invites people to come to us with a proposal about what they can offer and how they can do that.
Yeah, I've only asked that question simply because fundraisers, well, you know, I've had experience with a lot of fundraisers in the past, haven't necessarily been very successful. And so I think if anyone we take on, if they're taken on as a fundraiser, well, they should be judged according to what they're raising. And if they're not raising funds, then, you know, they're not succeeding. And I think we need to be quite strong on that, because it's not certain just by hiring a fundraiser you're going to get it. And the other point, the comment I would say is just we should decide what we want to do and then fundraise for that, rather than seeing what funds are available and running after them, and then suddenly having to do these things that aren't necessarily aligned with what we want to do. We can always conform what we want to do into fit the packages of funding windows that are open. But that's just a cautionary note. But I am a little concerned about us taking on a staff member. There's a long-term liability. And if they're not successful, then it's a cost to the residents of Froome.
Yeah, and we're not looking to take on a member of staff. And I think that we have been very good at making sure that we're looking for the pots of funding to support the project rather than the other way around. Certainly somebody said to me years and years ago, if you fill in a funding bid with integrity, you've got much higher chance of success. And that means you have to know what you want the funding for, and that you think that the pot is going to be a good match rather than just wedging something into a hole because it's there. So yeah, absolutely, John, we take both of those on board.
Thank you, John. Sheila?
Can you say that there's lots of funding out there? Can you just explain a little bit about that, where that information is coming from and why you think that's the case?
Yeah, so there are the usual pots of funding that are available at the moment. So the lottery and the Reaching Communities Fund, rewards for all of which we're now eligible for, and we weren't previously. So that's opened up something for us where town councils and parishes have become eligible for those pots of funding. Competition is quite high for them, so obviously we need to make sure that our applications are up to speed. There is Arts Council funding, which chimes and sits alongside many of the projects we've been looking at. And then we know that Peter put their application into the Community Renewal Fund with a view to that being the precursor to a much larger government fund that's coming online. And again, that's a funding bid that needs to be completed and written. So there are some really significant projects, big, large-scale projects that we would be hopefully looking to apply for, but then also lots of small ones. And I think it's kind of important to say that this is not just about supporting Froome Town Council, it's about supporting the way that we work, which is enabling and participative and in partnership. So it would also be supporting those partner organisations that we've worked with, and just looking at the funding that's come in the last couple of years, it has supported quite a lot of our work programme, but exhausted quite a lot of our staff resource. So if we want to continue that, we really need to create some capacity somewhere. And we think that there might be some people that are a little bit better than us, although we've been ace at it. There's probably other people that can help us and do a quicker, better job.
Thank you. Lizzie, you're up next.
Thank you, Andy. And even though I jumped the queue a little bit this time, you did it again. So the words that I wrote down were partnering and community and capacity. I literally can take a photo of my screen right now. So I was, really pleased to hear you say about partnering with the community, and some of the big kind of funding wins in the last 18 months have been working in close partnership with community organisations such as Adventure and with medical practice. And it's great to see that. And I think that helps move not only the kind of project, kind of winning the project, winning the funding kind of, it's across the whole community, but actually the delivery of the project, which then hopefully eases some of the concerns that people might have, other councils and other people might have about the council staff body just continuing to grow and growing to deliver projects and then just continuing to just be there. And actually we should be much more about how do we push out delivery of things for the community by the community. So I think, I'm glad to hear that those sorts of thoughts and comments coming from you. The other thought about partnering is how we can use our position as quite a successful, hopefully, town council, and as a bit of a hub for our surrounding villages and surrounding parishes to say, well, what can we do collaboratively that's about Froome and surroundings? So we're not just kind of going, yay, look at us, we got it all again. We're actually kind of bringing people together to do things that are going to have wider benefits in our kind of what's the word? The bit that surrounds us.
Neighbourhood.
Water, yeah, neighbourhood. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Rich, sorry, then Mark. Sorry.
Thanks. Just 2 points. I like the idea of identifying projects that we can't finance at the moment, something that, in the work programme that you might be able to do if we can get external funding. I think that's good practice. I know we've done that a little bit in the past, but I think that might be a really useful exercise for this upcoming work programme, that we actually do say, well, that would be great, but really we can't afford it unless we've got external funding. So I think, or external staffing. I think that's really good. And I just wondered, I forgot what my other point was now. Oh, no. In terms of incentives for fundraisers, if we were going to offer somebody £5,000, let's say, for argument's sake, to write a bid about something, if we offered them 4,000 and said, if you get the bid, you get 1,000. I don't know if we're allowed to do that sort of thing, but it would make sense to me, because it might give them a little incentive to be involved in it. But anyway.
It is how it used to work, fundraising, but actually, rightly, those people still need to pay their bills and they're doing a job, which means they can't do something else. So
you could offer a bonus.
Give them a commission. It is frowned upon these days to operate it in that way. I mean, I just think if you look at the fundraisers that we have had working with us to support community organisations over the last 8 years, they've been very successful. They haven't, in more recent years, they were very successful actually in getting organisations to a place where they have subsequently been very successful. So it's really difficult to measure that success, although I think what we want is some capacity, and we do want to see some positive results come out of it. But if it also gave us the wording that can be cut and pasted, I mean, it's a tough piece out there. And so it used to be something like 1 in 4 funding applications were successful, and it's now something like 1 in 10 to 15. So all of that is a bit of a gamble, but we know what we're doing is great, and we know why we want to do it. And so that puts us a bit higher up the scale of success for funding. And again, if it's okay, we can do this if we have external fundraising, then it's adding value and it wouldn't be detracting. So,
okay, fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Mark.
Thank you. Going back to John's point about being seen to take on ever more staff, we're already hearing murmurs about that, and I think we probably hear, if this is going to be an election year now, which it sounds like it will be, we'll hear more and more about that. So that's something we have to be mindful of. But in the last year, we've heard from our council staff who have raised funds that lots of money has been raised to employ a member of staff, or a member of freelance staff, or a member of temporary staff to fulfill a project. And I think that falls to Rachel's team to put that over, that we're only employing this person because we've been given the money to do that job, not because we're looking for taking somebody on to do something we'd like to do. So I think a communication thing would be very, very helpful. I mean, we've seen some projects that have come on, LC Whip and things like that, which managed to employ some consultants or some people to work to do that. And I think we really need to put that over, that this is where that money's come from. It's not come directly out of your precept to do that. And especially as we're hearing every day now about prices going up, like belts tightening, gas getting cut. This is going to be more and more relevant, and we're going to have to be careful about the projects we do. Seem to be worthwhile, and we never do frivolous projects, but they're really worthwhile and benefit to the town.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else?
I may just say one thing to be careful of is that an external fundraiser will bring some extra capacity, but he or she is also going to need to get a great deal of download from the officers to bring them up to speed to write the bid. To your point, the person who's closest to the project is the one who has the most integrity when doing the application.
definitely. And, I think for most of us on the management team, we have those papers, we've written stuff down, and we expect to be able to sit and talk through those things with potential fundraisers. But it means we won't be slaving over the words and making sure we put the dot in the right place, the capital letter, and so they will be able to give it the finesse, if you like, that we're probably less able to do according to the funder, because that varies too.
Yeah, all those portals are different, don't they?
Absolutely. Oh my God, don't talk to us about logging onto portals.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got anything else to add?
This is money already in the budget.
Yeah, we have it allocated already in this year's budget. And I guess as much as anything, it's that steer from you that next year the work programme, and I'm hearing what you're saying, Mark, you know, we're not looking to extend the work programme unless we can leverage in external funding for A, B and C, which gives us the opportunity to do those maybe 3-year projects, but nevertheless, you know, not infinitum.
Thank you. Lizzie.
Thanks, Andy. Just to clarify on the budget, so it's in this year's budget already. There's a line for it. Is there a limit on when that has to be spent by? Or is this something that you see rolling forward over the next year using that budget line?
So we've got £15,000 in this year's budget. So we would probably expect to spend that in the next 6 months. But if we didn't, we're not going to try and spend it, I guess is what I'm saying. It's about having the right fundraiser to do the right applications for the right projects. So I guess there would be a conversation if we didn't use that 15,000 about whether that is rolled over into a subsequent year or what happens at the end of that with you.
Okay. Thanks, Lizzie. I think it's time to bring this to a head, I think. Thanks very much. What should we do now? What would you like to do?
Just when the next meeting is.
Okay. So the next meeting is at 7 PM on Wednesday, the 17th of November. We'll see you all there. Thanks very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, guys.